Hi, everybody. Welcome to Forever Green Fridays. This week we've got our commercialization team coming to talk to us. As always, I want to acknowledge our lovely funders, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Clean Water Land Legacy Amendment, McKnight Foundation, and the Builders Initiative, among many other generous folks that help make this possible. Reminder that we are going to be recording this seminar. So let me know if you have a problem with that. Welcome to our folks online. Great to see everybody. We have some really lovely snacks. So if you were in a position to ever come in person, you should come in person next time because the team brought some awesome snacks, and Madeline made rugbrod. If you don't know what that is, you should have been here. You could have tried it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. And hi, everyone online. My name is Colin Cureton. I'm the Director of Commercialization, Adoption, and Scaling for Forever Green Initiative. And today you'll be hearing from, I believe, 4 of our team members with an overview of the Commercialization, Adoption, and Scaling team, our theory of change, how we're organized. I'll lead that part, and we'll be hearing from our market team on some new market-oriented programs, market development programs that they are building and launching. And then we'll hear from our landscape team, primarily Matt Leavitt, focusing in on eco programs, review of the last field season. And then we'll close with questions and discussion. There's a lot we will not be able to talk about today across a number of crop channels. There's just so much going on. But this is always a great opportunity to speak, especially to the research community, but also our many partners about what we're up to in the commercialization team. So I'll provide the overview and try and keep it to 10 or 12 minutes. So just a reminder of Forever Green's theory of change. We have this R&D core, commercialization, adoption, and scaling team, and the Forever Green partnership, kind of working on the science, market, and society components. And so the emblem there, you are here. That's what we're going to be talking about today. That's where we fit in the Forever Green theory of change. We're going to start with some news that was hot off the presses. If you go to the next slide, that this news dropped today. We'll play that video in a moment, but General Mills subsidiary brand Cascadian Farm announced a quadrupling use of Kernza by including a small amount in several of their most widely distributed national cereal products. This has been a long time coming, and hundreds, if not thousands of people have contributed to the Kernza ecosystem moving forward. But we also think this is a case study of sorts that highlights what the Forever Green commercialization team does while having some market opportunity.
Yeah, risk of having a market is diminished because General Mills is providing that demand.
We make sure that the ingredients that we select to go into those products are really specifically curated for the health of our consumers, for the health of the planet, and that we're creating that market for organic farmers to sell their crops.
By incorporating just 1% Kernza into some of the most loved Cascadian farm cereals, you're creating a market for U.S. farmers growing this beneficial grain. It's a small change making a big impact. From the ground up, you're standing for good.
So obviously Kernza has a really long way to go, but this is, major for our platform to be kind of front and center in one of the world's largest food companies, the solution that's coming out of Forever Green, our partners. And it's a really good case study because my job and initially Connie Carlson's job were created in response to some of the challenges of moving a crop like Kernza to partners like General Mills. And they realized that there was a lot that needed to happen in order to make that possible. And since then, the whole Kernza Cat project, our collaboration with the Land Institute, AURI's collaboration, but as one component of that, Forever Green has played this critical role in bridging that long-term partnership from 7 years ago when they tried to launch a project to today. We've been there every step of the way. I could say more about that, but it's just a nice case study and some recent news. So this is the CAS team, the Commercialization, Adoption, and Scaling team. Those in green are just those you're hearing from today. You'll hear more from them directly, but we have a 3-person landscape team of Sienna, Matt, and Andrew. Andrew also sits on the market team, which consists of Katharine, Madeline, and Andrew. And I'm integrated, across the board into that work. Next slide. We hope to be hiring a winter oilseed specialist in the first quarter of 2026. Putting the money for that together now. I think we have enough to Okay, so there's going to be a lot of animations here, Claire. So this slide just demonstrates the basic structure of the Forever Green commercialization team. Go ahead. We have a strategy layer that is highly relevant to how these crops move out in the world. You need to understand what the IP considerations are. Who are you going to license to? Who are your major partners? How are you going to put funding and financing together around these crops? Click ahead. We have a landscape team that supports farmer adoption. There's a whole strategy that has to go into farmer adoption. All our crops are very different. They have different target markets, different economics. Next slide. The trade room floor, the trade show floor is very different than a farm field, right? So we've learned that what the market team is up to is sometimes so different what the landscape team is up to. At the end of the day, they connect, but they're very, very different. And then we also have an operations team. Okay. So you just click ahead. This just shows, go through. This is where this team is structured in terms of their core functions. Okay, next slide. One specialist. If you click through, go ahead one more. You can kind of nest this commercialization team inside the science layer. That's the Forever Green Research and Development Core, and then also the Forever Green Partnership. And we broadly call that push, technology push, market pull, and societal lift. Okay, so we have an emerging theory of change for how Forever Green should work. This is a review from what we presented in September, but it's really important because historically we used to just think you have to do everything all at once. And we expended a lot of energy and chased a lot of threads. And a good mentor of mine says, classic quote, when you don't know where you're going, any bus will take you there, right? So how do you expend limited energy in this grand systemic change process around specific technologies? And we think first you have to develop something real, as Don Wise would say, that brings real value to the marketplace and also has a role in farmers' operations. Next, we think you need to run a place-based cross-sector de-risk pilot that answers the question, can this actually be grown? And you loop that back to the strategy layer. Then, very importantly, this is what most platforms until now, I think, haven't necessarily done, is you need to go to the market. A lot of people take that pilot and say, let's hand this over to farmers, right? You need to go to the marketplace and say, does anyone want this thing? And ideally, that's not the first time you talk to the market. Before that, you need to be engaged with the market. Does this meet a need, et cetera, et cetera. But really, you need to go secure a market partner. And then you let that market partnership pull acres onto the landscape. The way to farmers and their livelihood is through a market opportunity. It is not just through a new crop that does cool things that we care about, right? You then need to iterate this process, show success, keep building. And then we found that the policy environment is highly responsive to traction, not really just ideas. Like goodwill, yeah, we support X, Y, and Z, but can you bring a major market partner and 50 farmers? The policy environment is pretty responsive to that, as we found. Like NRCS has made changes faster than I would have expected in response to farmers coming to them and saying, there's a barrier we need to address, versus me as a university guy going and saying, we think you should do X. Okay, now there's gonna be some spaghetti there. This is the way, go ahead. This is the way a lot of initiatives operate. They kind of come in from the side. Hey, there's a cool crop. We really want to see it on farm. They say we need some policy support, come back up, try to deploy that support on the landscape, realize they need a strategy, come back down, enroll more farmers. Eventually they're like, what does the market want? Right? And then they come back around. And so a lot of energy is kind of expended going around that lower left side of this figure. Our theory looks a little different. If you go ahead, I'm not saying we get it right every time. We've learned the hard way, but our theory looks a little more like this. Next slide. So we come down through, the scientific process, try to develop a strategy, run that pilot, go out to the market, iterate, the landscape and market pull, get some policy wins, and keep going. That's basically our theory of change. This is really important because in the last year, we hadn't articulated anything like this. We were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And it's really important that we have a good idea of what we should be doing when and what the key bottlenecks are. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to overview was a couple of visuals of understanding innovation. We're basically in the business of innovation. Forever Green's an innovation platform, right? And so there are a lot of helpful figures out there to understand innovation processes. This is Department of Energy's Technology Readiness Index. technology market figure. They actually demonstrate, who's heard of the phrase valley of death? That's used sometimes. The bad news is there's actually three valleys of death. There's the technology valley of death, the commercialization valley of death, and then the profitability or scaling valley of death. I think our work in the commercialization adoption scaling team lives right there. I'm not saying it doesn't extend earlier or go past, but that is really this key part of having a technology that's ready or almost ready to go out to market, and then getting it through that initial commercialization phase. So this is just one visual that helps understand innovation. If you go ahead, there are multiple other frames, including scaling readiness. DOE also has an adoption readiness level that's more like, is society ready for this thing? Not just is the technology ready to go to society. So I think we're maturing as an innovation platform in Forever Green. And we're in an exciting time where we need to develop similar tools. One, we are starting to think about our crops on different phases of development. I'm not saying where we put each crop is correct. I'm just suggesting that we need to kind of think about where crops are at in terms of basic research, development, pre-commercial and early commercial. They are up to different things at different times, depending on the phase they're in. They need different types of support and expertise. So we can get a lot more strategic in understanding where these crops are in their journey, and then deploy resources, kind of like the R&D grant process went this year. We can be a little more collaborative and strategic about how we deploy resources. We are in the process of developing a crop tracker. I had a previous life where I was really involved in developing new indices in different fields based on things like the Human Development Index. It's kind of a classic issue of what gets measured is what gets worked on. So indices are inevitably oversimplified, but they're also really helpful for looking across multiple dimensions of a complex issue. So if you go ahead, Claire, we just have a very draft version of 12 dimensions with 4 across each of the 3 main activity areas of Forever Green, including technology push, market pull, and societal lift. And we're starting to map where individual crops are. I had a partner call this the spaghetti noodle. So that's an individual example for, I think, hazelnuts, where we feel like, wow, there's a lot of community support. There's not really much risk management in place. I'm kind of looking at Emily over there to see if you feel like this is accurate. We're releasing our first cultivars. We have pretty solid agronomy and economic understanding. There's a company in play, but there's a few areas like supportive policy around forestry adoption. So we can start to map out where each crop is at. You could also do that for the whole portfolio. Go ahead. It starts to get pretty complicated, or you can go ahead again and you can map the whole portfolio by different phases. So crops that are in development phase, pre-commercial and early commercial. When I ran this exercise, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it kind of tracked in terms of where we understand the different dimensions of each crop are at. We should expect to see it filling in over time, and we can kind of strategically target the weakest link. That makes sense? So this isn't just being done by the CAS team, but it's an area that I feel is really important for our work. But it's also important for the whole platform. The last thing I wanted to do was highlight a little bit of the progress in the Winter Camelina 1 million acre scaling study. Just a reminder that our winter oilseeds partnerships, we think, have enough potential that we really need to be thinking strategically and across sectors about how we're going to scale to that first 1 million acres. There are 4 funders that have come together to support this project: Builders Initiative, McKnight Foundation, National Wildlife Federation, and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We are co-convening this project with Embold. Embold is overseeing a core team of multiple organizations that have built this project, and they're also convening a partner circle that we're working to develop a cross-sector scaling plan together. And then Forever Green is managing an all-star team of consultants that we've hired through a company called Tending Ground to look at these different dimensions of the winter oilseeds challenge. And I'm going to highlight we hired this firm in September of 2025, and they've made a lot of progress. And I'm just going to highlight a few things without going really in depth. This is their work, so just kind of scratching the surface. So if any of the Tending Ground folks are online and I get it wrong, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have retired U of M applied economics professor Bill Lazarus working on comprehensive farmer economics and supply chain economics. I'm not going to present these results. It's just to show the kinds of outcome he's driving at, which is camelina in a relay cropping system at different yields, prices, yield drags, and how the economic performance of those systems map to, say, monocrop soybean, right? So he's doing a really deep dive into farmer economics. And he will be presenting those results to our community over time. But this is like, he's made a lot of headway in the last 2 months. We have the tending ground team has secured Ashley McKeon, who's the former regenerative agriculture director for Cargill, working on policy and market insights. And so a really interesting thing she's been doing is baseline market research on the market potential now and in the future for downstream markets like renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. And then really importantly, if you go to the next slide, the kind of great beyond mystery is how all of the federal and state renewable fuels, SAF, and low carbon fuels markets might actually affect pricing for supply chain partners, farmers. And so she's building that stack. And then they're going to integrate that with Bill Lazarus's economic modeling with another firm called Regrow Ag, who's doing carbon intensity modeling through DNVC modeling of priority rotations, geographic regions, to try and integrate the economic performance, the farmer economics, the policy environment to this is so complex. And it's really exciting to see them start to advance each component and also to move the project forward as a whole. So this is just a brief little insight into what they're up to. I think my last slide is I've just challenged our team to put a slide at the end of each of their segments that says, how could we be partnering more with the Forever Green research community with some specific ideas, but also like the disciplines. I feel like everything under the sun comes up in commercialization work. So I feel that we could have more partnerships with faculty, graduate students, and undergraduates in applied economics, farm behavior, food science, ag engineering, rural sociology, etc. And some specific collaboration opportunities. We have a really unique platform with the ECO program that supports farmer adoption. We have a couple proposals in on that right now, but over time, we're going to have a really fantastic novel data set to better understand farmer adoption. And also, I think we could definitely publish things like the crop development tracker alongside these other technology readiness frameworks, and just, contribute to the knowledge creation process. So, okay, you've heard enough from me. Next, we're going to go to the market team, hear about what they've been up to.
My name is Katharine Chute, and I'm the Product and Market Development Specialist for Forever Green. And I'm going to kick off the markets team section here. As Colin shared earlier, that's Andrew Leach, Colin Cureton, me, and Madeline Luskey. And Madeline will be speaking in a minute about another part of our work. So we'll be sharing about 2 new programs that we're really excited to be launching. One is already in the works, and one will be coming in early 2026. So I'm going to talk about the CLC, or Continuous Living Cover Market Builders Program, which is geared towards larger companies. And then Madeline will cover the SME, or Small and Medium Enterprise Program, which is for smaller business. So in talking about the CLC Market Builders Program, I thought it would be the easiest way to dive into this to think of it from the perspective of a company who might be a participant in this program. So imagine that you are an employee who works for a company and is interested in Forever Green. You may learn about us in some way, whether at a conference or maybe through LinkedIn, commenting on a post, and you'll have an initial connection with someone on the Forever Green team. And then from there, with this new program structure, we would encourage people who are new to Forever Green to attend an overview webinar about the program offerings we have for large companies, and then also to attend the Friday seminars that we're participating in right now. The webinar itself, this is the middle section of the slide, would introduce Forever Green as a platform and the crops that we work on, and it would highlight some specific key opportunities for commercializing the ingredients that come from these crops. And then we would also talk about the benefits of the program that we've built out for large companies, and conclude with a survey to help us understand how interested the attendees of the webinar are, and if there's anything we can do to improve in our first iterations. And then the real meat of this program is in the column that we're calling the active participation in this slide. So those companies who feel that there's a good fit, we would be encouraging to attend field day and learning days that we would host 2 to 4 times per year that cover a field tour of forever green crops, as well as a mini research seminar about some of the highlights. And those would be themed by potentially different industries, so say sustainable aviation fuel and winter oilseeds. Or they could focus on a specific crop or a specific type of use, like food uses that features the pilot plant in our food science department. Everything in gray that you see here would then be something that is accessible to companies who feel involved enough that they are interested in being a formal program participant and in sponsoring our work in some way. And this would involve having the opportunity to meet with our team for a welcome into that piece of the program, and then provide input through an advisory council on the needs that their specific industry sees for the commercialization of certain relevant ingredients. That's something that companies we have talked to so far really emphasize, is the opportunity to provide input. And we value that, of course, in a great way as well, to direct where our work can go in the future. And then the program participants would be able to work with samples of our crops and their ingredients. And then most importantly, they have access to work one-on-one on contracts for projects or for pilot partnerships that would lead to new product launches. And these could be either pre-competitive and available to anyone and partnerships, or they could be one-on-one focused on a specific company need. This slide gives you a sense of what this might look like on a calendar view. So we would have the webinars occurring every 2 months, and then field tour or seminar day events occurring throughout the growing season, depending on when it's best to feature these crops. And this is all designed to be accessible to anyone and to serve as a way to efficiently get the word out to a lot of different companies so that we can figure out where the best fit is to move forward on a one-on-one collaboration. So we are developing here at Forever Green a really unique set of technologies, and I think this group's very familiar. You can go to the next one. Some things that companies have emphasized that they value about our program is the uniqueness of having the combination of a breadth of expertise and also a depth of knowledge and equipment and expertise within each of those areas of the breadth. And then we have this unique purpose focused on not only farm economic viability, but also a suite of environmental benefits. We have an extensive grower network. We are developing more and more resources to help companies access the ingredients that come out of this program. And then we have the openness and interest in partnerships and in pilot projects. So in addition to that platform, we have recognized for a long time that industry has the potential to really help move things forward at an accelerated pace. And for that reason, we have been very interested in developing partnerships with the private sector. But we also have recognized that that takes a lot of time, one-on-one and usually upfront, and that these initial explorations don't always lead to a viable partnership. And so the goal of this program at this time is to systematize more of our corporate engagement, make it more efficient and effective so that we can spend more of our time focusing on those partnerships that create the most impact. And we're really grateful to the Builders Initiative for funding this vision for the development of our first iteration of the program. So I talked a lot about the benefits Forever Green is seeing. I just want to highlight here the benefits to companies that include staying informed on the leading edge of what we're doing, having a lot of chance to learn and connect with others who have similar interests and goals, and then having access to samples and having the opportunity to do meaningful one-on-one collaborations with these early stage ingredients. All of this is coming back to that top line goal of achieving more product launches with CLC ingredients, which of course then ties back to more acres of these on the landscape. So with that, I would close with a short appeal. If you know a company that you think would be a great fit, we're typically looking for a company that has existing sustainability goals, is somewhat tied to a supply shed in the upper Midwest, and also would have capacity and a small amount of R&D funding at minimum to dedicate towards this work. We'd be looking for cross-functional teams, and then we're pretty open across different industries. So please stay tuned for learning more in 2026. And I'm going to pass to Madeline for the next section.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, something that we've been talking a lot, or think a lot about on the market side of things is getting from a field or a seed or research to something tangible. Could be a beer, could be a food product, or could be a plane in the sky. But there's a lot of different factors that need to happen to make that work. And on the next slide, thinking about all sorts of market partners that need to be involved. So as Katharine was talking about, we're thinking a lot about those larger partnerships with big market builders like the Cargills, the General Mills, and they have all that potential to build the markets, have a large scale. But then you also have to recognize the value of smaller companies. So we see like Perennial Pantry there, Hazelhart Farms, Sustainagrain, Field Theory, those smaller companies that are doing a lot to show, demonstrate proof of concept, or grow that the nimbleness and the agility to bring a concept to market. And on the next slide, using Kernza as a case study. Now, this isn't a comprehensive nor an up-to-date list of Kernza products, but looking at it, you see a few larger national brands. You see the Cascadian Farms, Patagonia Provisions, the Kodiak Cakes mixed within there. But then the large majority of these products that are on the market are from smaller companies, often community-oriented. And that's how a lot of us first come into contact with Kernza or with other CLC crops, is through these smaller companies who are able to experiment and just showcase and bring a product to market quite quickly. So that's what the focus of the SME program is. So SME is the term small and medium enterprise. That generally refers to a company that has like less than 250 employees, sometimes a lot smaller. And this program aims to recognize how they can be major innovators in product and market development and commercialization. And so for this program, we're focusing on supporting businesses of that size that are innovating with the portfolio of forever green crops. So thinking back to Colin's like commercialization tracker or diagram, these crops are ones that are in the early commercial stage, so have that market availability at some degree. So it turns American elderberries, hybrid hazelnuts, also into winter camelina, pennycress, hybrid winter rye. Then on the next slide, we can see 3 participants that we have going out. So we have one round of this program that started back in August. Program runs from each round runs for 12 months. We have another one coming up. So our 3 pilot participants are 40th Century Grain, Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative, and the Grain Shed. These 3 participants are all working with Kernza in some capacity and are all more food oriented, but we are open to other industries. So 40th Century Grain, Beth Robertson Martin is developing a multi-CLC granola. So a Kernza-based granola, also with elderberries and hazelnuts. Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative is one of our 5 Kernza distributors. And we're working with them to develop a sample or trial program to really focusing on developing the market for conventional Kernza. And then the Grain Shed is a brewery and a bakery all the way out in Spokane, Washington. And they are developing a Kernza beer and bread product. And so on the next slide, you can see the structure of this program. So this is building upon the work that the markets team, early commercialization teams have been doing for the past several years, of just helping businesses in different capacities, but really systematizing and structuring the ways that we provide support. So there's a few different aspects to this. One is through funding and reimbursement for marketing and product development costs. These could be COGS for developing like a first round of a product, like packaging or ingredient costs. It could be contracting for recipe development help, sourcing, or other marketing costs. There's the aspect of forever green staff projects. So on the markets team, we can write out a scope and help in sort of mini consulting style projects. Some examples of those have been going to a trade show and doing consumer insights testing for CLC granola, doing some like customer segment analysis and reporting for conventional Kernza, and doing some sourcing help as well. And then we also have a peer-to-peer engagement aspect to this as well. This isn't a cohort program necessarily. We're mostly working one-on-one with these businesses, but we do have a few opportunities within this program to bring people together, share resources, and that energy for the CLC community. And yeah, a big part of this program is building up the system. So I want to highlight the peer-to-peer event. This happened is it 3 weeks ago now? 3 weeks ago now, yeah. So we brought those 3 participants on campus to Hayes 401 for a day of sharing resources, expertise, beers, vodka, those essential components.
Essential.
Or the commercial system. And I thought personally this was a lovely day. It was lovely to have this energy in the room. Ben Bowden took General Mills, talked about his experience in sourcing and procurement and category management. We had a speaker who provided insight on packaging. Beth Dooley catered for us and also gave a talk on CLC recipe development. And we had field tours. Pam Stoll gave a nice tour of some of the Kernza fields. And we ended the day at Bing Bruin. And it was a really nice collective gathering of people that are involved. And brought people together from Spokane, Iowa, Minnesota. It's very lovely. And so another little call to action, round 2 applications are live and close next Wednesday on November 14th. So if you do know any businesses that align with the criteria, pass them on. We'd love to get some applications, keep the conversation going. And now moving on to the next slide. Yeah, as Colin was saying, there's really a lot of touch points in a lot of areas of expertise that the university can tap into, like marketing, through market assessments, applied economics, animal science. We have such a robust animal science hub here in CFANS, and I think there's a lot of potential for feeding trials, feed formulation, pet food. That's really kind of an untapped market for CLC crops, engineering, operations, chemistry, food science, and then some specific collaboration ops are those pet food uses of vertebrate crops. Katharine had the idea of a graded MBA course project, silphium oil processing for the like cosmetic or other industry side of things, and also some like more specific kinds of research. That's always something that is very interesting to people and market partners. Like, for instance, what's the blood sugar effect difference? What's the glycemic load in meals? There's a lot to dig into. And now I will pass it off to the landscaping.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal
Oh,
the mic
okay.
real quick to say, before we go to landscape, I just want to commend the market team for all the progress that was made. I don't know, you started like 9 years ago.
7 months ago to this day.
7 months ago. Recently out of her undergraduate, launching a new program for a specific market segment for new ingredients, and Katharine to be systematizing our corporate engagement. We had a meeting the other day between Forever Green co-directors, the U of M Foundation, a number of folks that you quickly run into how the university engages with the private sector, like systemically, right? And maybe the last thing I'll say to folks online is we realized that we needed to systematize this process for market partners at different scales. And so if we're not immediately chasing what you've reached out to us about, it's because we're trying to build the structure that can sustain it over time. So I would broadly just say that also to our R&D leaders, we're in like a building mode internally, whereas previously we would like chase every last thing, but we realized the demand was kind of like way outstripping our capacity, and that we needed sustainable systems. So that's what we're, with the builder support, doing right now.
Hey, everybody, Matt Leavitt, I'm the agronomist for Evergreen, and I am part of the landscape team that's operationalizing kind of our core program on that front that's farmer facing, which is called ECO. And I'm sure everyone has come across that in some form or fashion over the last few years. Also, part of that team is Sienna Nesser, who's online, who does a lot of the kind of the contracting and payment processes with farmers and kind of guiding them through the Byzantine payment processes of the university. But the whole goal of this program, kind of in a nutshell, is to incentivize and de-risk new crops coming to market from the University of Minnesota. Because, you know, the science is there may be a market identified, but kind of the missing link between those two things is the whole framework of government support that's meant to, you know, incentivize planting of kind of our typical row crops out there don't exist with things like Kernza and winter barley. So it's a good bridge to help de-risk farmer production of some of these crops and really get the market started, because we live in this chicken and egg problem constantly with new crops that, you know, there needs to be a market and a supply, but you can't have a supply without a market. So this is state funding that's kind of in place to help bridge that gap to some degree. So this program started in 2020, primarily focusing on Kernza, and our whole goal, you know, writ large with a lot of the crops coming out of our program are they're crops that are acting like cover crops on the landscape. So have a very clear ecosystem service component to them. And that was kind of the basis of our state funding to help roll this out. So this is all clean water dollars from the state of Minnesota. I want to call them out. If any of those folks are on the call, their support has been really instrumental in helping to build the grower cohort for continuous living cover crops. And we're in our, I think, fourth round now of fundraising around this program. And as time has gone on, it started just to support Kernza in impaired watersheds around the state, which that map on the bottom right is kind of a heat map of impaired drinking water management sites around the state. And our crops have a unique portfolio in that, you know, being on the landscape, they can really help draw down nitrates, help build soil, and try to do a job of closing that big brown spot that happens in the upper Midwest post corn and soybeans harvest and before things are planted in the spring. So initially was geared just towards those areas. Now we've expanded statewide, and the crop portfolio has also expanded as well to include more crops that are kind of farther along in their commercialization journey. So it started just with Kernza. It's now grown to incorporate winter annuals. Has also included some agroforestry crops, and in the latest iteration, it'll continue to expand, we expect. But the basic model is that it is incentivizing production of these crops on farmland up to 100 acres per crop per farm, up to 250 acres per operation. So multiple operations are eligible. Now the geographic scope has been widened, so folks, you know, statewide can take advantage of these programs. And multiple operations can plant multiple different crops too. But assuming they get the crop planted, everything goes well over the fall, they get, you know, essentially what is like a cover crop incentive payment to the tune of 20 to 40 to 50 bucks an acre. Those payment rates are higher if they're located on those drinking water management supply areas. So we do still kind of create that as a focus of creating landscape change through incentivizing programs. The other part of this is a lot of these crops are so new that they don't have RMA risk management protection associated with them. So the state is also willing to cover up to half the cost of production on some of these crops in the event of a crop winter kills, or it's taken to harvest and there's, you know, maybe there's no market, or maybe it doesn't meet the quality needed to meet that market. And so on a year in and year out basis, that managing that risk is really critical for farmers to adopt new crops. You know, that farmers as a general cohort are very risk averse for a reason. And, you know, the state offering up money to help incentivize and de-risk these new crops is really an important step. They also get access to technical assistance, which is me. I'm an agronomist by training. Don Wise was my master's advisor back in the day, and I spent about 12 years in the seed industry, so kind of used to some of these crops from both a agronomy standpoint and a research context. We also offer a grain and seed testing program as well for particular uses of these crops as well. So this is just kind of a visual bar graph of where we've started with acres and crops and enrollment. And as you can see, over the years, we've grown in our enrollment of crops and also increased in acreage as well, which is super exciting. The map on the far right is a kind of heat map of where our crops are positioned on the landscape. And as you can see, most areas of the state are represented there. So we cover a pretty wide geography of Minnesota. Minnesota's a big state. In how they farm in the north is not how they farm in the southeast. So, some of these regionalities are definitely accounted for with a wholesale program like this. But I definitely make a lot of miles in the spring. I try to visit all of these fields at least once throughout the growing season and have multiple touch points with growers to make sure they're at least equipped with knowledge and able to be successful as they can be.
And Matt, what was just planted is considered the 26th crop.
Correct, yeah.
So this doesn't reflect what is just went in the ground now. And so total, I think it's been close to 10,000 acres until this year. And so we expect to be surpassing 10,000 acres this year.
Yep. Just another way to look at it is the amount of growers. And you'll see there's some trends there, but as acreage has grown, obviously there's very tangible market opportunities with camelina and rye, and Kernza is kind of ongoing. Winter barley has kind of been living in that pre-commercial stage. We've been trying to crack the nut of creating more market offtake for that, and I'm hopeful moving forward. But right now, there's kind of been like intermittent growers, primarily growing it for their own uses on farm for feed. So expect with more market opportunities that these crops will continue to increase. So this is kind of an interesting visual about the amount of growers that have been enrolled, total acres, and ecosystem service payments, and also risk management payments. So it's sort of an interesting, this is just particularly for winter camelina, a crop that has kind of seen, pretty significant growth, basically from 0 acres about 3 years ago to now, 5,000 acres between a few states. And it does chart pretty neatly to the ecosystem service payments connecting directly to the amount of enrolled growers. However, the risk management payments can vary widely, primarily on what the growing season conditions are. And so there's a little bit more to say about how we come up with these particular numbers and who succeeds and who doesn't. And some of it is a little bit outside of our control if we're dealing with, inclement weather and crops not, appropriately yielding out for whatever reason. But, it's nice to have that risk management in place. It's really meant a lot to, operationalize these crops and get them to moving forward. So a little bit of reflection of what we've seen from the field. I'm sure I'm not telling you folks anything you don't already know, but it's interesting to put this in context about, why we have maybe more payments going out in a particular year versus another. So acres are up in eco this season. We're still looking for kind of that market partner to take forward winter barley. But more generally, when you're dealing with winter annuals, obviously the state of the fall determines a lot the ultimate success you're going to have with these systems moving forward. And our fall was historically dry last year in 2024. It didn't really matter when you planted the crop because for most places we didn't get rain until about the end of October. So even crops that were planted a month and a half early didn't start germinating until that time. So plants were very underdeveloped going into the winter. And that was true across the board with Kernza, winter camelina, and hybrid rye. Those two pictures on the top right, that's actually a field walk I did earlier this spring with a winter camelina grower down in the southern part of the state. And those two pictures are from the exact same field, about 100 yards apart. But that top portion that looks beautiful is right by the drainage ditch where there was maybe a little bit more snow cover, a little bit more protection from the wind. That picture at the bottom was about 100 yards away and almost completely winter kit. So moisture limitation was a big factor. Also, no snow cover was a big implication in, inconsistent stand establishment in the fall. So that definitely carried through to both risk management payments and, future yields of some of these crops. I walked several fields of winter injured hybrid winter rye, which I'll show a picture of. And I've never seen that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that old, but having dead rye over the winter is pretty unusual. And also, not surprisingly too, contracts have meant a lot for increasing acreage as well. So the crops that have pretty significant and growing contract opportunities have been ones that we've seen more enrollment of in the program more generally. And then in the spring, obviously we had sufficient moisture and fairly good growing season conditions, but we also had an overabundance of moisture. Especially as you went farther west, there was kind of a blue circle of Minnesota that got, significant overage of moisture that complicated harvest and development of small grains and winter annuals. So this is kind of like the classic stop story of farming, that we're always at the mercy of the weather, even depending on when we're planting in the season. But that picture at the top is, some winter killed winter rye that I saw. But not across the board. This is not like, Minnesota's a big state. There's lots of different ecoregions. The photo at the bottom is a little bit north of St. Cloud, beautiful field of hybrid winter rye. So, depending on where we are in the state, your management, and where we got for moisture, the outcomes can be pretty different. On the whole, camelina yields were above where they were last year. I would say 800 to 1,000 pounds the acre was average across most areas, with some, asymptotic yields on both sides. We saw some extremely strong yields at the Rosemont station, average 2,000 pounds the acre, which is nuts. I've never seen anything that high. So whatever they were doing, they nailed it. But harvest was very delayed because those seeds were underdeveloped going into the winter. We were about 2 to 3 weeks later on harvest than we were from the previous season. So, people that want to do trial systems like relay planting, like double cropping, were essentially they didn't have enough growing season time to really make those practices viable. So it's like, this is all inherent risk in farming and dealing with conditions that we can't control. And small grains in general had, pretty average to below average yields. Wet weather and delayed maturity was definitely a factor in kind of the overall quality. Had several winter rye growers that dealt with lower yields and lighter test weights, so didn't make those quality metrics for end marketing. And I would say yields were off where they normally are for this year. Kernza was fairly variable, as it usually is. There's really no consistency to how it performs, other than to say there was a pretty distinct difference between conventional and organic. Most conventional growers ended up baling their stands for forage. Organic growers, depending on where they were, had average yield conditions this year. So some interesting pictures from the winter camelina soybean relay system. We saw this kind of scaled up in a big way, both throughout North Dakota and in areas of Minnesota, which is this is the gold standard production practice we're trying to get to with winter camelina. This is really where winter camelina adds value to a soybean system, is if we can integrate it and we're getting more seed and more oil per acre. And this is really like the system that Cargill is banking on to be operational moving forward. And both these photos are from the Rosemont station. They planted about 35 to 36 acres of a commercial field and had very good success.
Looks great.
Yeah, it looked awesome. Unfortunately, they had a sprayer mishap, so the beans didn't end up yielding the extent that they probably should have. They probably got about half the yield. So yeah, I mean, that's farming for you. But yeah, visually, this is kind of like proof of concept and where we'd really like to get to across the board. I would also say they were a little bit of an outlier in their winter camelina emergence and growth in the fall, because their fields are very sheltered. I think they probably maybe caught a little bit more of a rain than some other areas. But this relay system across the board, I put some language down there from the insurable deadlines there. So we are kind of working with what the weather gives us too. And even though we have more grower interest in these systems, sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate like we'd like to. And the minute you start stacking multiple crops on top of each other, the risk on the grower goes up significantly. So there's a lot of work for us to do to continue programs like ECO, to continue the research, the outreach, the education, to really de-risk complex production practices like this. So along with, kind of operationalizing the ECO program, we also do a lot of education, outreach, support material events as part of the ECO program as well. So this is just kind of like a small subset of events that we either hosted or co-hosted or presented at. So we, for example, hosted earlier this year a multi-state Kerns of Growers conference that was, focused on really diving into the weeds on Kerns of best management practices, and folks from Montana showed up. Josh was really instrumental in putting that together too, so I want to call that out. Where we had folks from Oregon, kind of all over the Kerns of growing ecosphere. So pretty cool. There was also statewide Camelina field days that we hosted. There was another Kerns a day in August at the Hastings WISMA. And then, all the stuff that doesn't make the list is kind of the numerous field visits, phone calls, texts, emails that come up, to try to patchwork the appropriate supports for growers all across the state. One other resource that we derived this year was pulling together folks from Cargill and researchers at the U, NDSU, ARS to create this Winter Camelina Growers Guide. And that's kind of our best resource for production right now. So this is kind of like when there's a need, a new crop comes to market and we need best management practices that is in a grower friendly format. Like that's kind of an example of some of the education and outreach we do with eco support. And then the last thing I'll mention is future opportunities for research priorities on our crops. So one of the things we're thinking about, along with partners at Cargill, is how to incorporate winter camelina into other rotations as well. So thinking through what crops exist out there in Minnesota right now, what rotations would this make sense in, and how can we help work with partners in the industry and farmers to help trial these and de-risk them moving forward. So one thing we're trying to fundraise and create movement around right now is camelina integrated into dry bean rotations. We feel like this has some potential. Same thing with potatoes. That's one thing particularly I don't have a lot of personal relationships in right now, but trying to create more inter-university and industry relationships to incorporate winter camelina on potato ground. Same thing with sugar beets and canning crops is a focus. Another thing that's of personal interest to me is expanding our Forever Green crop focus to include other new crop opportunities for farmers to help make the pathway easier to diversification, because it's a pretty big leap to go from growing corn and soybeans to Kerns, and there needs to be more on-ramps for folks to kind of get their feet wet with diversification, be successful at it, and have it integrate into more or less their normal production schemes. So oats is a big focus there. A lot of other folks are focusing on oats as well, which is great. But kind of building on that program of incorporating oats with legume plow down, so it kind of fits that continuous living cover framework as well, which I think will be part of the next year's intro program.
There was just a ton we were not able to talk about today. A list doesn't really do it justice, but like you might be wondering how many currency distributors are, what's demand look like, and pricing, and are there contracts? Like we could talk about that. There's also a fantastic new marketing and communications toolkit that was led by Katharine, funded by the Kerns Cat Project. There's a link there, and it's on kerns.org.
And involved a lot from the Land Institute.
And involved a ton from the Land Institute. And it's I've been watching them present these materials to Kerns distributors, and Kerns distributors saying like, these are the resources we need to go build markets. We also had some recent relicensing and licensing of new varieties that were launched. We have this multi-million-dollar partnership with Cargill, and the entire status of the different components of that we weren't able to go into today. That's also not managed primarily or only by the CAS team, but it's an important partnership. The entire hazelnut commercialization strategy and the status of Go First Farms. We added a new Go First Farm this fall with a transitioning dairy producer down in southeast Minnesota in the karst. Elderberry market development, we have a new scope kicking off. The Developing Markets for CLC Crops program that's managed by MDA, that Forever Green was pretty instrumental in developing, is still going strong. I think they're making their fourth round of grants to small and medium-sized companies now. I think $2 million has been allocated to that program. It supported 20-some businesses across Minnesota to build markets and supply chains for CLC crops. And then just in the background, like your labs are doing a ton, right? When you come to a seminar, you can only present like, here's a recent paper, a recent study. Similarly, we are in the background working on piloting winter barley, getting industry assessment of silphium oil. Now we have some volume of perennial cereal rye. We're nudging industry around winter durum. We have a bunch of puffed kernza. There's a great collaboration around that. So there's just a ton happening that we couldn't talk about today. Looking ahead, next slide. We hope to be hiring this winter oilseed specialist, which will be a really key addition to our team beginning of 2026. We also hope to hire a junior agronomist to advise more and more of these acres. I approve this guy's what's it called mileage. He puts on a lot of miles, so we need more than one person across the state. We're working on crop insurance innovation to try and think about what comes after eco, right? Like it might not immediately be an RMA program, but could we work with a group like Growers Edge, does parametric insurance, warranties to like have an innovative product. Eco 4 will be substantially larger than Eco 3. I'm participating in this really interesting thing called the Midwest Regenerative Agriculture Capital Orchestrator. It's convened by the TransCap initiative, and then we're launching these programs that you heard about. So this is just like what we expect to be engaged in along with a lot else in 2026. Then lastly, I want to introduce you all to the Gartner hype cycle. I think all Forever Green crops are up against this wave. And it's a cycle that new inventions and technologies go through. You have an innovation trigger, and then everyone gets really, really excited about the new things. And they usually get too excited. And that's when you achieve what they call the peak of inflated expectations. What goes up must come down. So inevitably that crashes downward into what's called a trough of disillusionment, where these technologies can never live up in their early stage to everybody's expectations and the societal need. And then those who stay on the path, there's usually a washout. You get on the slope of enlightenment and try to achieve the plateau of productivity. And my question is whether the CAS team and Forever Green as a whole can kind of like stay on a steady rise and help calibrate everyone's expectations. In that Gartner hype cycle, there's a lot of unproductive energy, right? That if we harnessed better, we could like stay on the path. And so I see this as kind of our role is to keep people from getting too excited, but then also putting a floor under things so that like we don't let society just kind of drop the ball on these new things we're working on, and recognize that they're like multi-decade systems transformation processes. So when I saw this, I felt so seen.
Hey guys, this was an absolutely phenomenal presentation. I just learned so much. I'm wondering if there are any plans to somehow summarize this information in a way that is shareable with other stakeholders, predominantly policymakers, in a way that's not just a one-pager. Like I have this vision of like a 5-minute sizzle reel of this presentation that we could just take in and show to legislators. It makes this work so clear and sort of substantive and substantiated in a way that the written word just doesn't convey. Have you guys thought about doing anything like that?
Well, thanks, Peter. I guess I would say all these sessions are recorded, but that's like an hour, not 5 minutes. And so we could consider something shorter. The world is getting turned into reels. It's true. So we could think about that in our communications strategy. Anne's not here, but I would look to Anne and Cora, especially to think about how we translate our message into the formats that people consume information through. I think that's something we could think more about. But thanks for the comment. And
yeah,
the idea.
really, really well done, all of you guys.
Thanks.
I had a question on the eco program. 2 questions. One, what is the demand like for that program? Like, do you have more farmers than slots or the opposite? And then also, how do people get enrolled? How do they get interested? How do you outreach to them?
Yeah, good questions. So the second one, we had kind of created postcards and, sent out PDFs and stuff, but now we've piled into a website. Just hopefully more shareable and easier to navigate. So, if you just Google search UMN Eco, it's the first result there. So that's how we've kind of gotten the word out. But I mean, a lot of it is, the farming community writ large is fairly diffuse, and there's not really one avenue to be like Google, email all farmers in Minnesota. So a lot of it is just showing up on the landscape, going to field days, going to conferences, speaking at events. I mean, a lot of it is kind of pretty down and dirty, relationship building. And that makes sense. I mean, for a new crop, farmers really want a lot of opportunities to see the crop, see it in the field. They may not have had any experience with it whatsoever. They may want to see a neighbor plant it. They may want to go walk a test plot of it and see. So sometimes it's a lot of like little hammers to get the actual decision to go forward with planting a crop. On the second angle, with available funding, I think last year we were about capped out on some of our crops. I think, we spent down our second iteration of the grant last year. It kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but we have put some caps specifically on hybrid winter rye with risk management payments, because what we found last year that we were about at the top of how many payments we could pan out. And that's great. I mean, that's why the program exists. I'm more than happy to cash it out to help de-risk this, but there does become a certain point where we don't want to leave people that have signed up or out in the cold. So we've kind of created more cap payments and have done a better job of structuring, okay, we can accept this many growers at this level, and that's kind of where we can end up.
Yeah, I guess I would add that from a design perspective, it's a really unique program, but for state dollars and then administered by university, we kind of make finance their head spin because it's basically crop insurance. So we have to make a conservative estimate of failure rates the same way that banks and insurers do. And if there's a catastrophic year, there's a run on the bank. But so far, we've actually been pretty good through 3 rounds of not overspending dollars, not being too conservative and underspending. Maybe we've just gotten really lucky. But it's a really interesting exercise to think about production costs, how many dollars are in the bank, what's our conservative failure rate, and so far so good. But that's why we need those bridges after eco, because we don't intend to scale this to millions of acres administered by the university. But we can gather a lot of data to then provide to these insurance innovators like Growers Edge. We have this really unique data set on success, failure rates, payment rates, et cetera, which is what they really need.
So the oat legume part of eco, that's kind of a departure from the original intent of that program, right? So what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I can say a little bit more about that. We have partners through the Land Stewardship Project primarily that have made a really strong case that we want to hear that we should support that effort to scale small grains and conservation practices that can deliver CLC. And we're doing it as a pilot. We're breaking off $50,000 from a $950,000 project to pilot eco and red clover plowdown strategy, kind of in support of that grower-led effort to diversify. And then also trying to have a strategic partnership where we can say each of those oat acres is potentially a CLC, like a camelina acre, right? If they, instead of doing a red clover plowdown, wanted to go into a winter annual, they'd be very well set up to do that. So the idea is basically partnership, and recognizing that diversification is an on-ramp to CLC.
And so was that in response to growers that indicated they wanted to do that sort of thing?
Yeah.
There's a pretty heavily utilized program in Olmsted County where I think they've also incentivized cover crop planting too, but they've done payment rates for oats and have really grown. I mean, there's a lot of different efforts on oats, but they've really grown kind of their county-wide adoption of oats just through that program. So that's kind of been one of the on-ramps to offering this.
And Practical Farmers of Iowa has some kind of program, they have a crop share program too, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like it's similar to.
It's very similar. PFI worked with PepsiCo and that group Growers Edge to do a warranty. with an industry partner when they enroll their growers, that's kind of similar to what Eco does. It's kind of like a floor payment. When they incorporate these conservation practices, some of the concerns are often like, well, that might affect the yield of my primary crop. Right, and so then they warranty up to like 95% of the yield of their primary crop. You know, there's different structures, but exactly, we're in touch with all of those groups. Or I should say some of those groups.